Okay, hello and welcome to today's webinar, Navigating the Vast Sea of Capabilities of IBM's Operational Decision Manager. Sponsored by Salient Process, a premier IBM business automation partner and professional services company. I'm your host, Jimmy Hewitt, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Salient's Vice President of Client Services and a world-renowned enterprise decision management expert, Jared Michalek. Also joining us today is IBM's Program Director for Automation Intelligence and Decision Management, another world-renowned decision management expert, Lenny Bromberg. We have a three-part webinar prepared for you today, beginning with Jared introducing decision management as a concept with real client case studies. Next, Lenny will touch on the Mayflower Autonomous Ship and IBM's Operational Decision Manager. What on earth does an autonomous ship have to do with a decision management platform? I'm excited to see what you've got for us, Lenny. Finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A section so that everyone leaves here at the 45-minute mark with all of their questions and curiosities answered. Now, without any further ado, let's get Jared's bit kicked off with our first of two polls. Everyone, please take 30 seconds to mark your answer. First question is, speaking of where your organization's business logic resides, is it stored in Excel documents or decision tables? Are your decisions stored in applications or databases or mainframes? Are they stored inside the brains of your knowledge workers? Or have you adopted a business rules management platform? Please take another moment to cast your vote. All right. You should be seeing the results here. And it seems like the majority of business rules are hard-coded into applications, databases, or mainframes. Jared, is this common, or what do you think?
That's extremely common. I'm excited to see that there are some that have adopted business rules management already, but hopefully we can share some additional use cases and showcase how you could even expand that footprint as well. But it's very common for those to be in systems already. In fact, I would say that's the most common. And so with that, let's jump into what are business rules and what is ODM. It sounds a little cliche, but operational decisions really are everywhere. And not every if-then statement is necessarily a business rule, but there's a lot of business logic, a lot of operational decisions happening in your applications today, in the knowledge workers' heads, in these Excel spreadsheets. And so we typically think of things like loan origination or insurance processing, and those are great examples, and that's probably one of the dominant use cases, but they cross across multiple applications. It can go across multiple verticals, and it can be across any geography. So there's really no limitation to what business decisions are doing. And they can certainly be some of those that I mentioned. It could be around pricing and promotions. It could be around customer experience, certainly. And it could also be helping to navigate an autonomous ship. And Lenny will talk about how it's doing that in a few minutes. Next slide, please, Jimmy. Let's talk about the IBM platform specifically. As you may know, IBM has adopted a new strategy for hyperautomation to address the large spectrum of potential automation opportunities that are out there. This is not just RPA, it is not just workflow. It is across all of these different pillars of automation, which include things like RPA, or what we call task automation, workflow, or what you might think of as business process management, business decisions or business rules execution, certainly, content management or ECM, and then finally data capture or OCR type capabilities. And surrounding that is a whole set of additional features, additional platforms that help us with things like visualization and analytics and modeling and management of that platform. This is the Cloud Pak for business automation from IBM. And you can see right in the center that the ODM component is a key feature in that Cloud Pak. Next slide, please, Jimmy. Some of the benefits that ODM brings are not just being able to execute rules, although that's of course a huge piece of that, but really able to manage the life cycle. So allowing users to make changes, but to do it in a safe and predictable way so that we can see impulses and what if scenarios, and we can see if we're breaking things in, unintentionally. And so just managing that overall life cycle. We can respond to changes very, very quickly. We no longer have to wait for weeks or months to go through rigorous testing cycles to make sure that we didn't break all of our other applications, because these rules are centralized. We can make them make changes in one place and really roll these out in days or even hours in many cases. And we're empowering the right users to make those changes, right? So we're lowering the bar. We're allowing business users, stakeholders, business experts to make those changes in the appropriate place. So the role-based security aspect and that overall life cycle is helping to drive that. And we can deploy these anywhere. Certainly the most common is a centralized web service that gets created, accessing that through either REST or SOAP, but we can also embed the rules into applications. We can put them into the core systems or the mainframes where they're needed. And so they really can go anywhere, even to autonomous ships, as we'll hear. We can scale these, right? This is, we talked about, it's not just business rules execution, but execution is a big piece of that, where we can see these being deployed across a wide variety of different use cases, but also at high volumes and high scale, and in a way that's very reliable and very durable. And lastly, this plugs into the larger ecosystem, not just from the experts and the partners that can work to implement the ODM structure, but also the technologies, the peripheral pieces that could play a role, such as RPA or workflow or content management. These are really important aspects that may or may not be applicable in certain use cases, but having all those tools in the toolbox is extremely important. Next slide, please. And let's talk about how this stacks up with other platforms on the market. As you can see on the right-hand side, IBM leads the charge in this space. And this is a very recent report that came out in December. If you want more on this, you can visit the Forrester website to see the full review and the full wave. But you can see that IBM is a clear leader in this space and has been for many, many years. Next slide. Now let's talk about real world examples. Where can we apply business rules and business rules management? We can see it spans a wide variety of different customers, just this kind of slice of different use cases, all the way from healthcare and medical, where we are able to use business rules to really streamline the delivery of organ allocations. And this is extremely kind of a powerful message that we're able to not just save money, but we're actually saving lives in this case. Looking at banking, where we're reducing the number of manual reviews. So that's a really good use case where we are trying to take something that people are looking at over and over again, and if the answer is always the same based on that data and based on some of that information, then we can really reduce that. Now, it's not going to go to zero probably ever, because there's going to be use cases where we still need a manual review. We still need those knowledge workers and that expertise and that investigation. But if we can reduce how many are going to those reviewers, then they can spend more time and spend more energy on the ones that actually need that manual effort. Looking at claims for control expert, looking at how many of those claims can be processed. So just really increasing throughput and also adding accuracy to those and being able to onboard new clients in a matter of hours as opposed to days or weeks. And then lastly, Brownells, being able to apply regulations and restrict and making sure that we're delivering these highly sensitive things to the right people, that these shipments are going out to the right people. In fact, Brownells was so aware of this constraint that until ODM came along, they did not allow these shipments to go out at all. They would have to be all manually processed, and they would have to be distributed through other channels. And so now they can go direct to customers because of the confidence and because of the regulatory restrictions that they're putting in place with the ODM platform. Next slide, please. let's talk about two use cases where Salient and IBM partnered to really deliver some really impressive value. One is a very large mortgage company here in the U.S. Where they're processing loans across a wide variety of geographies and different types of loans. And the problem was that they were reviewing these, and these manual processing times were just taking way too long. And they were also not able to apply consistent rules to those. And so each time a reviewer looked at it or took that on, they were using different kinds of approaches and different kinds of considerations. And so they wanted to standardize this as well as automate a large portion of this. And so by applying IBM ODM, we're able to increase the amount of loans that we can do. That's a good thing, because now we can just take in more loan applications. We're reducing the cost of those approvals. So those processing costs go way down because we are able to automate a good amount of those manual efforts. And lastly, we're reducing the time it takes to close. And as someone that's purchased a house in the past, this is a big headache where you're waiting for weeks or even months for some of these things to go through. And so if we can cut that time down, that's value to the customer, that's more money for the mortgage company. And so it's a win-win really across the board. So a really powerful use cases, and they're continuing to implement not just ODM, but additional capabilities in the IBM Cloud Pak for business automation. Next slide, please. And our last use case is a very large airline based in the US, although they fly everywhere in the world. And we were helping them to look at a problem they were facing in their revenue integrity teams area, which is, if you're not familiar with revenue integrity, it's really looking at minimizing fraud, being able to make things more consistent, focusing on maximizing revenue. And so they were seeing when there were multiple changes to itineraries, a lot of times it meant that those travelers or those customers may be trying to game the system a bit. And we wanted to catch those to make sure that they're following the rules, that we're applying these regulations and not losing money and losing some of that time. And so by implementing ODM and applying these consistent rules to that use case, the airline was able to really maximize their profit, to start to reduce the number of potentially fraudulent activities. It's a framework that they've continued to build on, and that's one of the really key pieces of ODM, is that you can continue to add and layer on top of it to make it a very powerful framework. And it's collaborative, so we're able to interactively work on these applications. It's not done in a silo, it's not done offline in some IT department. It's actually visible to the stakeholders, to the business, so that as we're making changes, they can see that, they can review those things, they can approve those. That's part of the life cycle, and really the value of getting those rules out there in a timely fashion. So with that, I think, Jimmy, I'm going to turn it back over to you for a second poll question.
Thanks, Jared. Great background on what does a decision management platform do, and what are several real-world client examples. Let's transition to Lenny with our second poll question. Please take 30 seconds to answer. How familiar with the Mayflower Autonomous Ship launch are you? On a scale of, I have streamed all 4 online episodes and can't wait for the 5th one to come out, to, I really haven't heard about the Mayflower Autonomous Ship or the technology. Please tell me more. Where do you fall? All right. We'll give another moment here. Votes are still coming in. And with about 80% of attendees voted, I'll go ahead and share the results. Check that out, Lenny. It looks like a narrow margin is going to, I've heard a bit about it, but would like to learn more. And we need to get some more folks streaming the online episodes. Maybe if we can pique their interest after your overview, we can see that come up. But what do you think about the results?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, it's, I'm not too surprised. I think that folks are still kind of learning a little bit more about this project. It's extremely exciting. Something that I've been fortunate to be a small part of, but it's really fun. And so I'll take the next 15 minutes or so here to kind of share with you guys what this is all about, why IBM even got engaged in this type of a project to begin with, and what sort of some of the connections are to leveraging ODM or decision making in other industry examples, many of which Jared already touched on. So it's kind of a nice segue. And again, thank you to Salient for hosting this webinar and for inviting me to share this story with you on it. So let's first just kind of talk a little bit about the aquatic landscape and some of the opportunities and challenges there. So as you can see here, right, there's a huge amount of the ocean that's frankly been unexplored so far, right? So we know very, very little about the ocean as it stands today. And but we do know that there are several challenges to things like maritime transportation, global trade, the impacts that our oceans have on the globe and that we are having on the oceans, right? So there's the shipping, which obviously shipping costs and global trade is a huge part of the way goods get passed from one place to the next. It's also a huge source of pollution globally. And another kind of side, aspect here is that 75% of maritime accidents are caused by human error. So these are just a few kind of, data points. You can go to the next slide. So what is this Mayflower Autonomous Ship, and why did IBM get involved with this to begin with? So first of all, the Mayflower Autonomous Ship it's a pioneering project of collaborative innovation led by marine research organization Promari and IBM acting as the lead technology and science partner. The goal is really to safeguard the future of the ocean and using marine autonomous capabilities to traverse the oceans, collecting data to advance our understanding of ocean health. The new Mayflower has no captain or crew. Instead, it will be using IBM's AI, edge, and cloud technologies to sense, think, and make decisions at sea. It is set to become the first self-navigating full-size vessel to cross the ocean. And it will cross from Plymouth, UK to Plymouth, Massachusetts to kind of commemorate the 400th anniversary of the original voyage. So there's several things that are kind of interesting about this project, which I'll get into. But one of the things, there's sort of technology goals that we've had with this project, but there's also a bunch of different scientific goals. So for example, I was talking with one of our research scientists who's involved in oceanic research, and she was saying that, and actually she's featured on one of the episode videos if you have a chance to check some of those out. She was saying that on a typical research expedition, they'll go out to sea for about 6 weeks, and about 4 to 5 of those weeks are just literally getting to their destination and getting back. And typically they'll spend about 1 of those weeks actually collecting samples and data that they'll use when they get back to their home labs to actually understand what that data is. With the Mayflower Autonomous Ship, there's, again, like I said, there's several experiments. One of them is an experiment called HyperTaste. HyperTaste is a technology developed by IBM for AI-assisted rapid chemical testing of liquids. It's inspired by literally like your tongue, right? It's the sense of taste. And it uses an array of electrochemical sensors that react to a wide range of molecules and ions in liquids. So it's basically able to taste and sense what's the salinity, the acidification, various levels of potential chemicals and things inside the ocean, and get that sort of biomarker, if you will, of what that ocean quality is like. So instead of rosy licorice having to go out into the sea for 6 weeks to get this data, the autonomous vehicle is able to just continuously do this for her, and actually send back that research for her so that she can do her job instead of going out to sea for 6 weeks and being away from family and stuff. So that's just one kind of side note here. But again, one of the big things is really this sort of technology goal of really building this fully autonomous, full-size, crewless ship that can traverse the ocean. And in doing that, we had to develop an AI captain that draws on a lot of different data points to help it navigate at sea. So you can click to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's going to be taking a 33,349 mile journey without any crew on board, going from Plymouth, England to Plymouth, Massachusetts, again, commemorating this historic event back 400 years ago. And it's going to be doing this, like I said, completely autonomous, which has never really been done before. Now, this isn't the end of the journey for the Mayflower when it completes this specific journey. It's really kind of just the beginning, and I'm happy to talk about some of that later as well. The next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the brain behind the Mayflower, and the AI captain. So what it's doing is it's essentially leveraging Power AI vision to use cameras that are on board the ship to sense and understand what surrounding objects are around it. So these could be ships, they could be buoys, and then it classifies those to understand, okay, knowing what type of ship or object it is, how will it then deal with it, and it leverages ODM to do that. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of great tech on this ship, most of which is on board. There's some stuff that's obviously on land as well, but the ship is designed so that it doesn't have to have connectivity full time with anything, right? So there is expected to be intermittent connectivity between satellites, but the ship has to be able to act and react completely autonomously, like no human intervention in there. And it does this with, again, the AI captain, which leverages ODM, leverages things like Cplex, Maximo, and Visual Insights. The next slide, please. So Maximo, as I said, is leveraging these various sensor data to capture the information, whether that be radar. It also leverages things from the weather company, so we understand, what is the current state of the weather. Are we going to be encountering any large storm systems that we need to avoid? And it also leverages a thing called ColRegs, which I'll talk about in a sec, which to help it make decisions about exactly where and how to navigate. These are then sent to Cplex, which, for those of you that may be familiar with iLog, which is the company that IBM acquired back in 2009, which I was a part of that company. We had sort of two main components. One was our business rules piece, which is ODM now, and one was our optimization engine, which is Cplex. And Cplex is basically a mathematical optimization engine. It's taught in many universities. It's the kind of de facto optimization tool. And what it's doing in this case is helping to define optimal routes based off of the decisions that are being provided by ODM on what is sort of legally acceptable navigation. Go to the next slide, please. So when ODM detects or identifies these potential hazards, it has to make real-time decisions on exactly how to respond and how to navigate. So there's as I mentioned, there's a series of regulations called the ColRegs. So these are essentially collision regulations, and there are conventions about how you deal with various size ships, various types of ships, various buoys. If something's on your starboard or port side, how are you actually supposed to navigate and move around these things? I grew up sailing the sea. I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, which is where the United States Naval Academy is based, and so I've always had a strong affinity towards anything kind of ocean and seagoing. So for me, this is a really exciting project to be involved in. it's getting to use, you know, a component that I'm now responsible for as a product manager for ODM and obviously, you know, navigation as well from the sea. So it takes those decisions and those rules essentially about how to navigate the sea, and it makes a decision on what is the correct path and trajectory and velocity to go at. Now, one of the things that's super important about this is the transparency of the decision. So, you know, as you can imagine, with any sort of, you know, autonomy or AI, you know, enabled, you know, systems, one of the big challenges that people tend to have is, well, how do I know, you know, why it's making some particular decision? And this goes for industry as well. I think many of you that have already been, you know, involved in decision management projects probably recognize this as a common goal that you're looking to address is, why am I making that particular decision at that particular time? So ODM does a great job about giving you transparency, not only into what the rules are. So, you know, if this condition is set, then I make this decision, but at time of execution, why did I make that decision? And giving you that sort of full tracing history to be able to see exactly, you know, why this particular decision was made at a particular time. Again, something that's extremely important in any regulatory environment, but especially when you're enabling this kind of form of autonomy, being able to kind of prove to regulators why a decision was made is extremely important. You can go to the next slide, please. So, you know, that's a bit about the Mayflower ship. And again, happy to answer questions. So please feel free to post questions into the chat. Let me just talk for a minute or two here about kind of where we see autonomy in automation aspects applying in other areas. So, you know, as you can see here, this is a report done by the Institute of Business Value. 79% of companies believe that effectively applying intelligent automation across the enterprise will help them outperform their competition. And this goes across, you know, tons of different areas, whether it's, you know, how are you treating your customers? How are you reducing, you know, or improving efficiency and reducing costs from, you know, some of your core business processes to supply chain challenges to, you know, helping you manage HR or IT. You know, as Jared mentioned earlier, right? Decisions are everywhere. It's about finding, you know, what are those kind of repeatable decisions that are happening at various points in your organization, and where are those areas of opportunity for automation. And I guarantee you probably don't have to look too far before you find several of those opportunities. You can go to the next slide, please. So, you know, we have a great, you know, partner ecosystem. Again, Salient Process has been a leader in this space, both from a process and a decisions perspective. They're great to work with, as many of you know who probably, you know, joined this webinar. You know how great they are to work with. They have a lot of deep expertise, and we have a large ecosystem of people that are here to help you progress your automation, you know, challenges. So please leverage that. A lot of deep industry expertise, domain knowledge. You know, we've got a long history in research and development from an IBM perspective. You know, the leaders in patent creation, since as far as I can remember, we tend to be about twice the number of patents as our nearest competitor. You know, year on, year out, and we want to continue investing in exciting challenges like this. I mean, you've seen things like, you know, Watson Jeopardy challenges. You've seen things like, you know, beating the best chess players in the world. You know, and now we're taking on this kind of form of autonomy. And I think this is really just the beginning of a lot more to come. So with that, I believe, yeah, this last chart is just really there's a few links here, which Jimmy will follow up on sending an email to folks so that you have the links here. There's actually a really cool activation. If you haven't taken a look at it, this top link here will bring you into a 3D environment that we developed. that showcases how the Mayflower Autonomous Ship is being used, and you even get to kind of play around with, identifying obstacles, and then also some of the research projects that are being involved, that are ongoing inside of the Mayflower ship. So it's set to take off here early June, and should be about a 2-week voyage before landing in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So please follow the ship, and we look forward to further engagement. So with that, Jimmy, want to take over the next portion?
Come off mute. Sure, we'll stay on this slide for the next portion of the webinar, which is the Q&A portion. I'm going to go ahead and enable that. So to our attendees, you should see a chat feature on your browser here to type away. I like this section. It helps us understand how well we did in each of our sections. So we've got a good 10 minutes of Q&A before we're gonna end the webinar. And we'll give everyone a minute to type away.
They have some background Jeopardy music or something. Yeah.
Or maybe the SpongeBob theme song. Oh, it looks like your cliffhanger worked there, Lenny. With regards to the Mayflower voyage, what are those future impacts that you see happening after the initial voyage?
So yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of, like I said, oceanic research that's going to be that's continuing to happen now. I think that there will be that obviously oceanic research will continue. There's scheduled to, after the voyage is completed, that there will be making several other journeys throughout the ocean. And the idea, and so Promari, who is one of the the sort of the founder of building this ship, and the idea behind it, alongside with IBM, is really looking to apply this and see where it can apply for many different areas. Again, both they're primarily focused on ocean travel, but really, as we said, this sort of decision-making capability is something that's inherent to all industries. So I think that there will be probably further adherence to things like the coal regs, again, regulations on sort of how to navigate various situations, but also places and opportunities outside of the sort of shipping navigation world, which we're seeing come into play. But again, specifically to the Mayflower, it will be continuing voyages outside of just this initial voyage, in collecting more data, and even making decisions about where to go. So there's some talk about kind of letting the research projects that are on board almost help and influence the decision of where to go. So for instance, another example of one of the research projects is it's listening for like whale sounds, right? So there's some auditory capabilities that essentially a microphone that's kind of being dragged, if you will, throughout underneath the water to listen for different kind of migratory patterns that are happening for sea mammals. And so there's this talk of basically being able to kind of follow and navigate based off of information that either it's gathering by listening to the sea, and as we mentioned, it's also tasting the sea with the Hypertaste project, but also being able to let those projects kind of influence the navigation of where the ship will go to. So pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, and I think it was episode 4 of the online webinar series that spoke about, okay, we've got one autonomous ship, why not 2, 5, 10, really get to know the expansive unknown of the ocean.
Absolutely.
Okay, other question here. What version of ODM is being used in the Mayflower? Are there any predictive aspects to the logic processing?
So it's using the traditional ODM. So I'm assuming that maybe the question is like, are they using ADS or automation decision services versus ODM? It's using ODM today, although actually a lot of the modeling was done initially using Decision Composer, which folks may be familiar with, is it's similar to the modeling construct that's inside of ADS as far as top-down business-led driven modeling, and that was intentionally to make it very easy for for people that aren't technical to be able to actually develop and author these rules. But it is using our kind of tried and true operational decision manager platform for execution as well. I see another question about the flavor of the different kinds of decisions the Mayflower has to make. So primarily it's around, it's around navigating for around various objects. So, again, if you have a ship at sea, or if you have buoys, how is it supposed to treat those? What are the rules of the road, if you could think of it like that, right? So, do I pass this buoy on my, my port or starboard side? If there's a large tanker coming into way, what's the proper place or decision on how I'm supposed to navigate around that? Like, do I let it pass? Do I try to go in front of it? Typically, there's a kind of common rule of the one of larger displacement. So if you're a bigger ship, I'm usually going to let you I'm usually going to go behind you and not get in your way, because sometimes, of course, larger ships can't even see you, depending on your size. But then there's also things if you're under power versus under sail. But essentially it's around kind of navigating. Now, that's kind of one aspect of it. There's future things that the team's also looking to do, as I mentioned, with some of these experiments, being able to kind of take some of those into your decision criteria around, maybe that becomes a future aspect of helping me decide where and why and how to navigate, right? It's I'm taking the experiments on board into play and helping that as be a factor, not only just, the weather, the obstacles, but also, where is, what are these experiments kind of sending me to me as a decision-making criteria? So there's sort of, again, lots of areas to explore there.
Yeah, I find the weather input as a fascinating one, and one that can be really applicable towards an industry like retail. Which products sell more during certain types of weather? How do you manage your inventory there? And speaking of retail, our next question is ODM being used in retail, and how easy is it to set up? We'll give you a break on that one, Lenny, and maybe a sip of water, and we'll let Jared speak to some of the retail use cases he's been a part of.
Yeah, for sure. I think retail is really probably in the top 3 or 4 of industries that benefit from ODM and decision management in general. There's a number of use cases that we can easily point to around things like inventory management, prices and promotions, being able to do kind of checks on various aspects of orders to see if they qualify for other kinds of incentives. Marketing is a big piece of that. So really across the board, there's many places and a number of our customers, our retail customers, that are using ODM today. And it fits very well with that idea of being able to adapt and respond to changes. So you think about things like seasonal promotions, or even just in the last year, think about how impactful it would be to be able to have curbside pickup be more automated. And ODM played a huge role in that when people were not allowed to go into the store, but they're still buying things and wanting to go pick them up in person. And so having that ability to change the way the business is operating and to maybe change some of the constraints and thresholds in real time, and to be able to really take advantage of new opportunities or mitigate those risks, I think is a huge piece of that.
All right. Let's see, we just got another one. Does this also include decision-making around how to navigate if the water is low, or consider the geography of the surroundings? Would this have cartography applications? This one to me kind of speaks to adding or changing decisions on the fly, maybe as a business user, if you want to touch on that aspect of the answer.
So, I mean, I can talk about a little bit. So it does obviously have to, from the ship's perspective, it does have to deal with obviously very large, wave fluctuations. So, that is something that the ship is designed to deal with, and some of that will come into the decision-making process and come into ODM to as a factor, if you will, to help it navigate. As Jimmy's mentioned, and I said earlier, we are leveraging the weather companies, which is something that IBM purchased several years ago, as a data source to help inform where and how to be navigating to hopefully avoid some of those larger storms. But that's part of what it has to be able to do, is to be able to essentially withstand some pretty harsh conditions. For anybody that's ever kind of been out at sea, whether it's been on like a cruise or if just a short pop around, typically you're trying to pick good times to go. You're not necessarily going in the heat of a giant storm, but if you're on a two-week voyage, there's a lot of times you just can't avoid that. So the ship has to be able to withstand that, and it's designed to be able to handle that. But of course, making appropriate decisions along the way. Jared, I don't know if you wanted to address the kind of corollary question that Jimmy was asking about kind of business applicability of those.
Yeah, I think there is, because if you think about the applications that the ship is doing, we could certainly translate that into other autonomous vehicles that we're going to see more and more, both automobiles certainly, but also think about drones and being able to make some of these similar decisions on land and in the air. And you think of tracking shipments for retail and supply chain type opportunities, or you think about weather or other kind of disaster type things for healthcare or health providers. So I think there are things that this will translate into and advances that are going to be made, not just in the realm of oceanic research, but also in real world scenarios and day-to-day operations for many companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cartography application is an interesting tack on to that, leveraging maybe some GIS imaging and the other geography and the surroundings into their decision-making models. Not sure if you're the question askers from the oil and gas industry or not. But if you would like to follow up on that, there's a QR code on your screen. We'll give the attendees that do have more questions, and the ones that, unfortunately, since we're up on time, weren't able to get their questions answered, an opportunity to pull your camera phone out and scan the QR code. That's a live link to Salient's calendar, where we're making ourselves available to anyone who does have more questions, more curiosities, or use cases that they want to chat through. This is what we do, and we're here to help. And with that, thank you everyone for your time today. This has been a great time as your host, and I hope you all pick something up as well. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you for our next one.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.